We finally made it. We are here for the fantasy playoffs. It is Best Ball Pod Advance Week. Unfortunately, my trusty co-host Drico is under the weather, so we are sending our thoughts out to him this week. But you are getting a very special solo edition of Stat Chasing this week, or should I say, Sack Chasing?
Pat Fryer Helmo.
This is why I'm hot.
Anita Handjob.
Fix your sight.
Jamar. Alpha play chase.
Are you kidding me? Kadarius Toney?
You can't handle the heat.
It looks like we're finally at this point. You're right.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you for joining me here. Happy Best Ball Pod Advancement Week for those of you who celebrate. We're going to have a little slightly different programming tonight than you're used to. Normally, I've got my trusty co-host Drico with me, but he is unfortunately under the weather. So I'm just going to be rolling this one solo. And I just can't stand my giant face on this screen, so I'm going to go ahead and bring the charts up right away. Things will be a little different here without Drico. Honestly, he is the best co-host I could ask for because he really lets me take what I've synthesized from all of the stats that I've poured over and the games that I've watched, and he kind of lets me vibe out with it a little bit more. And then he keeps me more grounded, where I might say something that is outlandish or what he feels may not be consistent with the data, or he'll have a good supplemental point to something that I say, and he'll kind of keep us on track. So it's going to be a little different without him. We're just going to get the pure sack word vomit stream of consciousness tonight. So what you can expect from tonight is probably worse takes and analysis than usual. A guy who likes the sound of his own voice way too much to be willing to do a show solo. And you're definitely going to get a lot more playoff best ball and things that are just more directly in my wheelhouse that I am comfortable with, because that's what sack chasing is going to be all about. So I think before we start diving into the stats here and going through our charts per usual, I would be remiss if I did not acknowledge that it is playoff or Best Ball Pod Advancement Week. I hope that it is going well for all of you out there in the audience. Pretty pleased with how the season went for myself, and I've seen lots of people in the community with really good advance rates and some fun teams. Lots of people at the top of some of the leaderboards, like for regular season prizes or for the marathon. I won't jinx any of you who happen to be sitting near the top of the marathon, but just know that I am watching your teams eagerly, hoping that you do take down one of the big ones here, and hoping that I don't see any of you in my pods. And if we do, I wish you the best of luck in all your other pods. But that's enough rambling. You're all here for the stats. So we'll get into our quarterback chart. I'm not going to do the normal preamble where we explain what the chart is. It's week 14, man. If you're still here, you know what this is about. The first note that I had on the quarterback chart is surprisingly playoff best ball themed. I know that you're shocked, but the guys that I wanted to talk about fall into the category of kind of disgusting quarterbacks that I'm like not super excited to watch play NFL football, not really excited to have on my fantasy teams. Like if I see these guys on a team I'm advancing in a normal regular season best ball pod, I'm like, shit, I wish I had a different quarterback. But for playoff best ball, there's a confluence of factors that make them much more palatable. And those guys are Trevor Lawrence and Bo Nix. So you can see where they're at on the chart. They're both in the quadrant where it's these guys have volume but lack efficiency. They're getting a decent number of dropbacks per game. Bo Nix has had this a little bit inflated where he's got that crazy overtime game where they ran a ton of plays, and there have been a couple. Really, it just feels like the Broncos find themselves in spots where it's like, oh God, we need to come back in the fourth quarter, and there's nothing we can do except let Bo Nix throw it 20 more times in the game. And like if you remember the Giants game that happened, you get the Commanders game that happened. So Bo Nix just does this weird thing where he's not particularly good. He's very inconsistent, but he's good for like 3 or 4 really sick plays in a game. And like even as the certified card carrying member of the Bo Nix fan club or Bo Nix hater club, excuse me, I have to admit that he's got those in the bag. Why he's so interesting for playoff best ball is he's a quarterback with a pulse, and he falls in the quadrant, one of the 2 quadrants where it's like, hey, this guy has volume. He's not down in the, Aaron Rodgers quadrant where, hey, that is a guy who could be live for playoff best ball. His team is, favored to make the playoffs in his division over the Ravens, but just the volume is not there. And like, sure, he's a little bit more efficient than Bo Nix, but I mean, the difference in number of dropbacks is more than going to make up for that difference in efficiency. And so combine that with the fact that the Broncos are one of the teams with the highest odds of making the Super Bowl on the AFC side. And when you couple that with Bo Nix's price as well, where I feel like on DraftKings, he's a lot more hotly contested. There'll be teams where I just get sniped on Bo Nix. And on Underdog, at least today in the limited drafting I've done, he's a little bit easier to kind of like stake your claim on. Like if you get RJ Harvey, no one, at least so far for me today, I haven't really had anyone try to contest me on Bo Nix. So he's pretty interesting. I really like him at his price. He's definitely one that I'll probably have a lot of if the current market behavior holds. The other one I mentioned is Trevor Lawrence. So Trevor Lawrence is like the emergency, like break glass kind of quarterback where what I've been realizing more as we've done more stuff with the Sims and playoff best ball is the game is just a little bit different than I think a lot of us had come to understand it over the last couple of years, where I used to think of the game as, by any means necessary, get a viable Super Bowl lineup, one that has like at least a decent chance of being in a Super Bowl and has, the ability to fill out my starting roster in every draft that I do. Right? It's so important in every draft that I do. And I actually don't think that's correct. I'm pretty sure, and we've got some very solid math to back this up now with the Sims, that what this game actually is it's a game about patience, man. You just got to go into the rooms. A lot of rooms aren't going to break your way. People do stupid stuff. They blow up your stack. They snipe a combo that you need, what have you. It might even not be that anything in particular goes terribly wrong in your room. You just might get kind of ho-hum combos, and it's just not going to be enough to take down a finals in that particular Super Bowl combo. You might finish, highly, but you're not live for first. And so what the Sims really helped illuminate for me is it's more about trying to tread water in the rooms where you can't get these monster teams, and you're just trying to stay alive until you can hit that big play. Basically, you're trying to be the quarterback that has a better success rate than Bo Nix, but still is able to deliver those big plays downfield. That's what you're doing in playoff best ball. You need to hit the deep shots. That's how you win all the money. But you can't just go and turn the ball over or go 3 and out all the time when you don't get the monsters. And that's kind of how I feel like we had been playing in the past, and people who had followed kind of conventional wisdom had been playing in the past. And I do think that it's better to have break glass options like the Jaguars and Trevor Lawrence in your bag, where if I'm doing something like, man, I really want to try and get a super strong start. I got CMC and Saquon. I'll try and get Hurts and all the Eagles. If I miss out on that, though, I've got these really strong NFC pieces where if those teams are in the Super Bowl, they'll be the highest projected player. And so I'm just going to play it through some low probability AFC Super Bowl where this guy's and this team is going to get at least a game because they're very likely to make the playoffs. Maybe they sneak 2. And if they do go on a run, this is how I actually win all the money. And I did it in a way where I didn't just punt my entry. I'm not like dead to advance round 1. Anyway, that's probably a whole lot more playoff best ball insight than you cared about for Trevor Lawrence and Bo Nix specifically. But I felt like those guys stood out to me probably just because I've been doing so much playoff best ball and drafting so much of them. But where they're out on the chart, it's like I got my playoff best ball beer goggles on now. They're starting to look a little Trevor Lawrence and Bo Nix, they were like a 2 out of 10 earlier, but it's closing time now, baby, and they look good enough to take home on some playoff best ball rosters. So, all right, next note that I had, this is a short one. Jacoby Brissett, he can't keep getting away with it meme. If you've been watching the show, I'm pretty sure for like, I don't know how many weeks it's been now. It feels like forever, but I have consistently said, like, whatever Jacoby Brissett projects for in whatever projections it is that you're using, just go ahead and bump that up. Just the volume is so ridiculous there, man. I mean, he averages the highest number of dropbacks per game. Now, I believe, if my memory serves, they get the Texans this week, and they're missing, I believe, their starting tackle. So it's bad news for them this week. I might not be quite as aggressive with the Brissett projection bumps this week as I have been in the past, but I bet you I still bump him up just purely on the fact that his volume remains under projected. In these past couple of weeks, I've been adjusting his projection up as much as, like, if he'd projected for like 16 some weeks or things, I'm projecting him for like 20. Or like there was a week where I think Mahomes projected for like 21, 22. And I had in my notes for the slate, like, make sure Brissett should project for as much as Mahomes on this slate. And I was like, oh God, I don't know if I can bump him up that much. And so I chickened out a little and moved him a point lower than Mahomes. And then sure enough, that was a slate where Jacoby was like mega optimal. It's like, I should have just listened to my own analysis. But yeah, Brissett just continues to be fun. It'll be curious to see how he fares against a really tough Texans defense this week. But feel pretty good about that call. And I do think that for the rest of the fantasy playoffs, you're pretty happy to have pieces of this Cardinals offense because the volume is just really, really good. And I guess more specifically the passing game. Last note on the quarterback chart, we're gonna keep it tight here. The last guy I had was Shedeur Sanders, who had been so bad in previous weeks and over such a small sample that he kind of broke our chart. He was just like so low on the chart that it skewed everything and made it really hard to, get a good visualization of where everyone else was. They just were all too tightly clumped together because of how terrible he was. Has a monster game against a putrid Tennessee Titans team, like absolutely awful. I do want to inject like a little bit of caution here for anyone who is like, oh man, I can totally play Shedeur Sanders now, or the Browns passing game, like they've got the solution. A big chunk of this efficiency for Shedeur was generated by huge yards after catch by his receivers. So you have Jerry Jeudy takes a slant to the house, monster play. I can't remember exactly how long it was. I want to say it was like a 60-yarder or something ridiculous like that, 60-yard touchdown or something. Adds a ton to Shedeur's numbers there, where, we can't take that away from him and say like, oh, well, actually, since the receiver ran after the reception, it doesn't really count for Shedeur. Like, that's not what I'm saying. But what I am saying is it's a lot more volatile than, if he's hitting guys and doing that with like significant air yardage behind it and not as much yards after catch. The other one, you get a huge Judkins run after the catch as well. So anyway, just wanting to add a little bit of caution there to the Shedeur efficiency. I would expect this to regress. But yeah, overall, my sentiment is bullish for the Browns, where this seems like a meaningful upgrade over Dylan Gabriel. I know that's not a huge bar or a very high bar to clear. But yeah, ultimately think that it's a positive for him and the Browns going forward. Just something where I don't want to like read too much into it here. So I'll go ahead and move on to the next chart here. We've got the running back snaps and usage. My notes on this one. All right, this one I think pretty important for playoff best ball. Also going to be useful for DFS. And, if you've got these guys on your teams in best ball pods, you probably care about this. But the Kyren Williams versus Blake Corum stuff, like how much of this was signal, how much of this is like, oh my gosh, like we need to be worried about Kyren Williams, Blake Corum is taking over. I'm here to tell you, if you are a Kyren Williams manager, don't fear. This is basically the exact same split that has happened over the last 4 games. Granted, Corum had a little bit of an uptick in usage this game, but that's because they're beating the brakes off a shitty Cardinals team that, they don't really need to go out there and load Kyron up with touches. So Corum does see a little bump in usage, but I'm pretty sure it's very game script driven. And also Corum's like efficiency just looks really good. He popped a big run, gets a touchdown, looked good on it. Don't want to take anything away from him. He wasn't like terribly explosive. Pretty sure he gets caught from behind if it's like 10 more yards. But like good enough that he's a serviceable back. He is like a solid backup running back. Never someone you should be like playing really in DFS or even like, a 12-man underdog draft. That's like not a thing that you do. The fact that it got there is like very, very cool. Like you played a player projected for 6 points and he happened to smash. All players who are projected for 6 points can smash. That can be in their range of outcomes. Like I think back to, I want to say it was last year. I want to say it was against the Panthers where people were talking about, oh, do you play Tyler Algier against the Panthers because there might be a ton of garbage time? It's like, I mean, no, like cool thought. And yes, he does end up smashing in that game. I think he puts up like 20 half PPR points because he gets 2 touchdowns. But that's just like not a thing that is good process. It's a thing where you're going to lose money over the long run if you're chasing these really low projection players and saying, oh, well, this game script is going to be the thing that leads them to fall into the end zone twice. It's like anybody that is getting touches can fall into the end zone twice. Like you don't need to go chase a guy with, a projection of 6. That's just not a thing that I would recommend doing. So in summary, not terribly concerned about Kyron's role going forward. I think this was pretty game script dependent. Probably makes the Corum price a little bit more expensive in playoff best ball, but he was already a pretty important piece just to be able to fill out Rams Super Bowl rosters, because the Rams really don't have very many pieces that are viable. Like on underdog, I'm not drafting any Rams receivers outside of Puka or Devontae Adams. Like you can miss me with that Tutu Atwell shit or whatever random guy you want to click there. That's good for you. It's not something I'll be doing. But Corum is kind of like my last stop there. And then on DraftKings, sometimes you just find yourself in a position where you got to click a random Rams tight end and you just got to do it. But for the most part, Corum is like my drop deadline on Rams. And I'm not going to take anyone that projects for lower than him in playoff basketball. Okay, next note I have here, I think are all of these on the next slide? No, I've got Tony Pollard here. We'll do Tony Pollard before I go to the backups. Only note that I have here, cool game, Tony Pollard. I don't think there's a ton of signal here. They just, the Browns did not show up to play, and there is some really poor play on some big Tony Pollard breakaway plays, like that long touchdown run. There's just a lot of guys falling down, and so that was cool. I was happy for Tony Pollard, and it helped me advance some teams. I have way more Tony Pollard probably than I should. I think our inputs may have been a touch hot on him, given the overall offensive environment this year. So I think Tony Pollard might have been one of my process misses this year for regular season best ball. But sometimes better be lucky than good, baby. So we will take the Tony Pollard nuke game when we needed it here. Okay, the next running back notes I have for you, I believe, all come from the backups chart. So let me go there. Yeah, so Omarion Hampton, he is bigly back. Looked really good in the usage that he got. He did miss. He had a bad rep in pass protection. I didn't think Vidal was perfect in pass protection either, for the record. I think PFF had him graded slightly higher. But there's a play where I felt like Vidal, it might not have been his fault, but if it was his assignment, he missed the assignment. I think over time you're going to see Omarion Hampton get more and more of this role. Vidal could be annoying in that he could hang on in the passing game, but it's not like Hampton was unused in the passing game. He looked good and very fluid when he caught the ball as well. So if anything, the most annoying thing would be if Vidal carves out a third down role and they really like him and prefer him for pass protection stuff because of how hampered this offensive line is with all their injuries. I mean, they lose Trey Pipkins as well in this game. Like the Chargers are probably the least lucky team as far as offensive line injuries this season. Just when you consider like the number of offensive line injuries and the caliber of players to which they happen, like Chargers are down really bad at offensive line. But overall, I think very bullish for Hampton. He's someone I'm super excited to have on best ball teams. Like if you've got him into the playoffs, that's pretty good. You're pretty stoked for Hampton there. Next note I had, oh man. So for every rookie running back that we are excited about, there's a rookie running back for which we are sad. And this poor guy doesn't even make the chart for us because his snaps just aren't high enough. And that's Bashal Tootin. Bashal Tootin, 2 really bad fumbles, man. Gets benched for fumbling. The game, even when it's out of hand and they take Trevor Lawrence out of the game, Bashal Tootin still does not get snaps. It's still ETN. Pretty bearish there. The like Bashal Tootin breakout week just seems like, he took 1 step forward and maybe 2 steps back. Maybe it's a 2 steps forward, 1 step back thing, and we're just in the middle of the step back, and it feels bad, and the world's ending if you drafted a bunch of Bashal Tootin. I got a bunch of Bashal Tootin teams in the best ball playoffs, and I sure hope he could do something. I think at this point, for like a real ceiling outcome, you need an ETN injury. ETN's a great piece in playoff best ball, by the way, like phenomenal advance rate piece, and like the kind of guy where if that team makes noise and goes farther than you think, like he's just, it's all gravy, baby. But yeah, Tootin, I mean, even after the game, Liam Cohen had a comment where he said ball security, something to the effect of like ball security is really important, or ball security is at a premium or something. It's bad. It's not great for Tootin. So sorry, Tootin bros. I think it was a really good process pick. The guy looks good. Unfortunate about the fumbles and unfortunate timing for the injury on the game where he was like taking over with the hot hand stuff, but that's just the way she goes sometimes. All right, those are all the running back notes I had. On to the tight ends here. All right, we gotta start with the cover boy. I believe Drico said he has been the cover boy for us 3 different weeks so far this season, and that is our duck-footed king, Harold Fannin. I mean, what can we even say about Harold Fannin? He is the tight end 6 on the season in tight end premium and half PPR leagues. 24% targets per route run. When you look at this chart, by the way, and you look at the guys who are like up around that level, we're talking like George Kittle numbers. We're talking Zach Ertz numbers where these guys are getting peppered with targets or like a major focal point in their team's offense. Harold Fannin is the number 1 pass catcher on the Browns. Like there is no real debate about it. Got some fun Fannin stats for you here. Over the last 6 weeks, he has had greater than 10 yards per reception in every week. Seems pretty good. So I brought that one up in particular because when you see his ADOT here, it's 5.7, right? So you think, he's like kind of a shorter, little check down kind of guy. That's not really his game. I mean, he catches balls downfield as well, but when he does catch the short stuff, he is adding serious yak. It is the takeaway. Like Fannin he's just very, very good at the game. I don't know how high he's going to go next year, but it's probably not high enough. I hope I can be really, really in on Fannin next year is what I'm getting at. But man, here's another fun Fannin stat. So, 8 of the last 10 weeks, he's also had greater than 10 yards per reception. He's also averaged 6.5 targets per game over this stretch. So he's doing it on volume very efficiently. One of the tight ends I want to see in my tight end room down the stretch. My biggest regret in regular season best ball is that I did not take 100% Harold Fannin. He was probably the very best pick in the last round of drafts. That is the way that it is. Okay, other tight ends. All right, you got to hear me out on this. I know there's many of you in the audience that have been scarred by this man, brutalized by him. You've martingaled for many, many seasons on this tight end, and that's Kyle Pitts. But you could do worse than Kyle Pitts right now. I'm just saying you're probably okay to play him in DFS contests. Obviously, you've been marked safe from Kyle Pitts for playoff best ball. You're not drafting any Falcons, so don't worry there. But he's going to be a solid guy down the stretch here to close the season out. You know, if you've got him in a home league or something like that, like he's a very strong starting option. Over the last 3 games, when Kirk Cousins has started, he is averaging over 7 targets per game and 65 yards per game. Pretty good. His problem is he hasn't gotten in the end zone but once this season. But I mean, you know, that can change. So you get a Kyle Pitts touchdown with the same usage he's been getting, all of a sudden you're looking pretty good. So I'm pretty into Kyle Pitts down the stretch here. Really, it's, you know, like in DFS stuff, it's just going to depend on his costs and ownership and things like that. I don't think he's really flying too far under the radar, you know, in salary cap DFS, but the underlying metrics in the profile is good. That's what I'm trying to say with Kyle Pitts. All right, and while you're all here, you're here for the playoff best ball specific lens of the tight end position, because our friends at DraftKings require you to have a tight end in your starting lineup for playoff best ball. And that is a very different dynamic than underdog, who has the W/T position where it just combines all pass catchers into one position and only requires 5 starting players in your roster as opposed to the 6 on DraftKings. Got to tell you right now, it felt so much nicer to draft on underdog, because just that additional roster spot you need, and the fact that it is a tight end and the pool of viable tight ends is so small in the playoffs, it can be really hard to get a good team with 6 in the Super Bowl on DraftKings. So I've put together a list of your vegetables that you need to eat in playoff best ball. These are guys that are going later, but they're pretty good. And also here's like they pair very well with some of the teams that don't have their own strong tight end. So for example, you're drafting Rams. Obviously, you know, you'd prefer to get like a Hunter Henry or a Dalton Kincaid or a Evan Ingram, one of the tight ends from the 3 teams that are, you know, the highest probability to make the Super Bowl in the AFC. Those guys are contested, man. You don't just stroll into a DraftKings playoff best ball draft and casually pick one of the tight ends on the favorites to make the Super Bowl. That's not how this works, bud. You know, Hunter Henry, wherever you think he's going to go, you know, by ADP, he's going earlier. Like he's the guy you just always get sniped on. So it's good to have these break glass in case of emergency tight ends, not only because they are there to help you advance guys with a bye out of round 1. So like if you did do Patriots and they end up getting the bye, you need someone to help you scoot Hunter Henry through. Or you did the Broncos and they get a bye, you got to, you know, get Evan Ingram through. The players that I'm looking at for that also have some of their own Super Bowl equity. I'm not just drafting a guy who's totally dead to, you know, randomly luck box his way into a Super Bowl. AJ Barner, pretty interesting. Hear me out. If you look at where he's at on this chart, 23% TPRR, very low ADOT, but he definitely is the clear number 1 tight end for the Seahawks. You know, you could do an Elijah Arroyo thing if you've got a Seahawks specific build and you get sniped on Barner, but Barner is basically free. And he is someone who there's still a decent chance the Seahawks get the bye. It's around 20%-ish right now. But Barner is one where, you know, he can make his way to the Super Bowl in some outcomes for you. And that can be pretty valuable in that format. And he should be able to fill your tight end spot the vast majority of the time in week 1, you know, the 80% of the time they don't get the bye. So I like Barner a lot as a, you know, one of your eat your vegetables type tight ends. The other one, and this guy's steaming up. I think the steam is just like coming for this guy in general since he's gotten back from injury. We kind of lucked out this week as far as like steam on this player. It could have been even worse. He had a touchdown called back due to penalty. That's Brenton Strange. Honestly, I think Brenton Strange could have had a much bigger game than he had. So it kind of keeps him under the radar. But you look, he's got 10.7 ADOT, 21% targets per route run. Jags are not a lock, but very strong probability to make the playoffs. I mean, about as much of a lock as you get at this point in the season. without it being a lock, like the Patriots or, the best teams in the NFL, like the Patriots, But yeah, Brenton Strange, another one I'm very happy to click as one of my eat my vegetables tight ends. And here's the last one, probably the grossest of all. There's so much that's gross with this guy. It's the fact that we were pretty certain he was going to lose his job over the summer when we were starting the season, but by the grace of injury, he's managed to hang on to it throughout the season. The team in general is kind of allergic to scoring fantasy points. There's like no one really there that scores anything outside of their number one wide receiver. Not even their running backs score points. And so you're kind of, if you're playing this full team to go to the Super Bowl, you find yourself kind of up a creek where you're a dog to advance out of round one because you filled your roster full of total pieces of shit that don't score any fantasy points. And you do need to score fantasy points to advance, especially in a 1 out of 6 structure like DraftKings. But that tight end is Dalton Schultz. So the Texans have decent odds of making the playoffs, and they could very much make a run with how open the AFC is. But I really prefer Dalton Schultz, not as like, I'm slamming all the Texans, but more along the lines of like, I've got Nico Collins and I'll throw Dalton Schultz on there as well. And he'll help me advance out of round one. And if the Texans, string together a couple wins, that's really big for me. So I like him more as like a push me through the round one, if I've got a tight end on bye type piece. But there's definitely some teams I have where I have outs to Texans in the Super Bowl. Maybe not my primary objective, but definitely an outcome where I've still got a strong 6-player Super Bowl roster. I mean, as strong being a relative term because it has like Woody Marks on it and something, and that's not in general, I would not consider that a strong roster. But when his team is one of the only 2 teams playing on that slate, all of a sudden he becomes okay. All right, I think that's all the tight end notes that I had here. We will move on to the wide receiver chart. No one cares about these backup tight ends. We're just not making it a thing. I mean, Evan Ingram is like the most overdrafted, but like by necessity guy in playoff basketball right now that you just like kind of have to. If you're drafting Broncos Super Bowl, it's like, I guess I'm taking Evan Ingram. I like him better on DK. I mean, I basically don't really click him on underdog a ton. He'll get into some of my Broncos onslaught stuff, but where he has, you just need to fill that tight end position, and it's like a warm body will do. I mean, shit, I'm clicking like Davis Allen sometimes for Ram stuff, so you could do worse than Evan Ingram. All right, on to the receiver chart. Drico with a good comment in the chat. Let's get rid of the backup tight end chart next year. Yeah, you're probably right. We'll think about it. Maybe we just specify guys that we want to add to the starters chart for guys that are like young breakouts. All right, wide receiver chart. So DK Metcalf did a thing. You can see him. He's pretty near where the 2 median lines intersect. He's in the quadrant of getting decent weighted targets per route run, but like slightly less efficient than you'd expect in his fantasy points per game. He's kind of draftable in playoff basketball. Steelers look like they'll make the playoffs. I clicked him today. I hated it. It's like, well, that's a dead team. I just wasted a roster spot with DK Metcalf. But I checked our inputs in the Sims. They're right. Like, he's fine. You can do worse than DK Metcalf. Honestly, it wouldn't surprise me at all if after like bemoaning that I drafted DK Metcalf on a team and I hated it so much, if he's the guy who does like the Lad McConkey, advance rate stuff from last year where he just goes crazy and absolutely nukes and pushes a bunch of teams through and he's a one and done piece. Seems par for the course for the game I love so dearly. But anyway, yeah, Metcalf, he's draftable, I guess. So Brian Thomas Jr., Jacoby Myers, I'll just talk about this. I think we talked about this in the past. There's a flippening right now. Jacoby is like definitely the guy ahead of Brian Thomas Jr. right now. That's the way I'm drafting it in playoff basketball. I think like that is how you operate until we're proven different. We held on to the prior of Brian Thomas Jr. from last year, being such a superior talent, and that, he was going to be the alpha, but we've gotten enough sample under our belt this year to maybe Brian Thomas was a Mac Jones merchant, or maybe Trevor Lawrence is just really bad, and he can't actually utilize the best players on his team, and he's much more comfortable with throwing to guys like Jacoby Myers and Parker Washington and Brenton Strange and all that stuff. He can't hit the big plays to Brian Thomas Jr. outside the numbers. That could be it. They've also deployed Brian Thomas Jr. differently this year. The Liam Cohen offense, he's not just exclusively running verticals. They're doing more crossing stuff for him. I think in general, I'd probably expect him to tick back up a little bit, just because I do think the talent is really high. And I think a lot of the early season stuff was kind of marred by injury for him. But I'm just not particularly bullish on him because I think Trevor Lawrence is not very good. But in playoff best ball, sometimes Trevor Lawrence is in fact the nuts because he wins a game, and having players move on into the second round is very good. And so Brian Thomas and Jacoby Myers, both interesting through that lens. All right, next wide receiver note I had. I think we're going to move on to the next chart. Yeah, so there's a couple playoff best ball warriors on this chart. Nico Collins, pretty damn important piece right now, I would say. So here's the thing. In playoff best ball, there's like a drought at wide receiver points right now. I feel like in the past, it's been like there's a drought at running back points, where the teams that are in the playoffs, you just didn't have a good running back situation or something. Feels like running back, they're a dime a dozen now. Like I have drafts where I just end up with like 3 workhorse running backs for the first 3 rounds. I get something like CMC, Saquon Barkley, Josh Jacobs. I'm like, all right, cool. I hope someone leaves me Broncos so I can play Broncos with whatever workhorse running back from the NFC makes it there. So running back is much easier to come by this year, it feels like. And so because of that, the wide receiver position is kind of at a premium. And it's really hard to fill, especially on DraftKings, where you don't have the luxury of that WT aspect. It's really hard to fill out a starting wide receiver room in a lot of different Super Bowl combos. Like if you're playing Eagles, those Eagles receivers are contested, man. And like if you don't get both of them, you're relying on that AFC team to have receivers that are playing there. And so if you're playing Bills Eagles, it's like, do you even want a Bills receiver? Not really. Like you're going to pay way more than you probably should for Khalil Shakir to get him on your team. Like you're going to sacrifice a meaningful piece to fit him into your roster. And so we're in this environment where you need to find these receivers who can get you there, because the receivers that are actually probably going to end up scoring points in the Super Bowl stink. And so you're like, I couldn't actually get there by playing, Kayshon Boutte or, Keon Coleman or Troy Franklin or all of these guys who are like, if you have them on your roster and they're live in the Super Bowl, you're like, yeah, this guy could get a touchdown. If you have them and it's round 2 and you're going against teams that still have like the majority of their players alive and they've got a Nico Collins or a Christian Watson even, or the Jags receivers I just mentioned, or the Bucks receivers, and you're like, oh no, my Troy Franklin is outprojected by 6, or my Keon Coleman is outprojected by 8 points. You're just going to find yourself, so far up shit creek without a paddle that it's going to be really tough to advance. And so that's a really long-winded way of saying receivers like Nico Collins, where you're not super excited for Texans to play Texans to the Super Bowl, but he could make a run. Like it's reasonably possible that they could go to the Super Bowl and at the very least like could win a game here or there, and he projects well. It's like, okay, Nico Collins is a pretty cool pick, even if I'm not playing Texans Super Bowl. And then I feel the same way about Christian Watson, where he's not of the same echelon as Nico, but the Packers have higher Super Bowl probability. And so when you weigh the fact that Christian Watson is kind of emerging as the alpha there, or at least like a co-alpha with Jaden Reed, who we'll get to on the next chart, these guys are just really important to sprinkle in playoff best ball. The other way that you can play it is through these two guys at the top of the chart, Puka Nacua, Jackson Smith, and Jigba, where you're using them as like your anchor wide receiver. And then you just need some loser in the second spot that's going to like not give you a 0 as you're trying to, progress your way through the tournament. And then when you get to the finals, you're just like, cool, I've got the best projected receiver on the slate and a warm body in my next one. I'm filling my flex with a running back and like, we'll call it a day. So wide receiver dynamic, pretty interesting in playoff basketball right now. Definitely something I've been noticing. It can be pretty hard to navigate. I think there's a lot of people drafting teams that look good to them on paper that are basically dead to advance, just because of how weak they are at the wide receiver position, because there's just not a lot of projection to go around. So you kind of got to get those pieces where you can. This note I kind of touched on, the enshittification of Troy Franklin. Kind of looks like he gave back some of his role. I guess gave back is the wrong phrasing. It looks like Pat Bryant might be emerging. My read on this is it's probably not as sticky as I would like. My initial reaction is like, oh my God, the Pat Bryant breakout's here. It's over for Troy Franklin. I think what's most likely is we're getting this Sean Payton offense where it's like, hey, it could be anybody any week. It could be a Troy Franklin week. It's kind of like Packers light, where it's like, I think Cortland Sutton's the one who scores the most points on average, but Troy Franklin could do it sometimes, or, sometimes it's going to be Pat Bryant. So I'm not ready to say Troy Franklin's dead, but I would just like, a couple weeks ago, we were like, Troy Franklin flippening has happened. He is now ahead of Cortland Sutton. And I think that might have been a little premature. So I don't want to get out over my skis now and say, oh, no, now it's Pat Bryant and the Pat Bryant era is here. I think it's more like we're in a Sean Payton offense. It's going to be spread out among these guys. I think by the time we get to the playoffs, like week 1 of the actual NFL playoffs, you probably see the projection leader for the Broncos is Cortland Sutton, followed very closely by Troy Franklin and Pat Bryant. I don't think that there will be a big difference between them. I think it's going to be kind of a tight cluster there where there's not one guy separating from the pack. So anyway, last guy I had a note on, Chris Godwin, thinking he's back. And by back, I mean he went like 5 for 55, so it wasn't like some spectacular performance or anything, but he seems healthy. He seems back. I think he is on the menu for playoff basketball. Bucks got a little less appealing after their loss. But yeah, Godwin, I'm like low-key excited for Chris Godwin on my best ball rosters heading into the playoffs. I think he could, especially in PPR, I think he could be a guy that is pretty fun to have on some rosters. So, all right, last chart. We're doing it. Only one note here, and that's for the best wide receiver on the Green Bay Packers, and that's Jaden MFN Reed, because this guy comes back. He's immediately very involved. They're doing end arounds and stuff to him. He is the most dynamic player on the field for them. It's not particularly close. I'm like in case you haven't heard me talk about Jaden Reed before, I am like a dyed-in-the-wool Jaden Reed truther. I loved him coming out of college. He's really dynamic, like had good, return profile in college. Like I'm just a sucker for the guys that can do the receiver things, but also are very good in the return game. Like there's pretty good signal there that you're just like good at the game and good with the ball in your hand, which does matter. The player that I comped him to coming out is actually his closest neighbor on this chart, and that's Steph Diggs. The problem with Jaden Reed is he's kind of slot trapped. He's in slot jail on the Packers. And so you just don't get a full complement of routes, which is partially why he is here on this chart. Maybe you see an increase in routes as he's back and more healthy. And I think as the Packers like get into situations where they have to pass more or they're pushed, that's where we could see really fun Jaden Reed games. So he is one of my favorite playoff basketball picks. I loved him in the way too early stuff because he was going undrafted. And like if you told me, hey, you got to pick a Packers wide receiver who scored the most points in week 1 of the playoffs, like I'm pretty sure I'm taking Jaden Reed or Christian Watson, like even money. And Christian Watson was drafted almost every draft, and Jaden Reed was going undrafted. So he's one I really like a lot. He's basically, I kind of flip him and Romeo Doubs, where Doubs, he's just so much more likely to appear. If it's a Packers final, Packers make the Super Bowl, right? The cards turn over. You're just a lot more likely to see Romeo Doubs on teams than you are Jaden Reed, at least the way the market currently has it. That might change over the next couple of weeks, but if it holds and Romeo Doubs is more represented on Packers teams than Jaden Reed is, give me Jaden Reed, man. Like, give me the guy who, I know we've gotten Romeo Doubs spike weeks. Like, believe me, I've drafted a ton of Romeo Doubs in regular season basketball. He was woefully underpriced, really helped my advance rates. Big Romeo Doubs fan, huge fan of his work. But Jaden Reed is just like a different caliber wide receiver than him in real life. And I'm hopeful that can translate to more fantasy points. And I think that it can. And when you give that to me at discounted ownership, I'm very excited about that. So that's pretty much everything I had on receivers. So yeah, you just got pure stream of consciousness, sack word vomit for the last 45 minutes. Shows a lot tighter when there's not someone actually providing valuable context and insight to my, off the cuff, like kind of brain synthesis of stats and game film that I've watched. Yeah, definitely missing Drico this show. Feel like it is not the same show without him, but I do think it would be fun to go ahead and rip a playoff best ball draft. So that feels like the only right way to end sack chasing. Hopefully the inaugural and only episode of sack chasing. We're jumping in a gauntlet. We got the sidekick up. We're just letting it rip. Sorry I didn't give Chad a warning. I don't want to draft with any of you. All right, we do have some friends and family here. I do see player Q. That's Neil Orfield in the lobby with us. I'm a pretty big fan of the 6 spot, by the way. Really like the 6. Think I like it a little bit more on DraftKings than Underdog. Granted, I've only done less than 10 drafts on this new slate of Underdog, and I've been done drafting there in the way too early stuff for over a week now. So a lot of stuff changes with the with the new information that we get. But yeah, I like the 6 spot quite a bit. It is a spot where I feel like reading the room and kind of having a lay of the land allows you to flex your muscles a little bit and get the most out of IKBs. We'll see how this draft shakes out, and if it's one where I need to IKB or not. A lot of the time I'm pretty happy just doing top guy on the sidekick. I will tell you it's very different drafting in a 1 out of 6 advance versus 2 out of 6 advance. And so for people who haven't been, if you're not very, very unwell and you haven't, been all over the new contest that dropped, I realize I probably should zoom in a little here. If you're in chat and this is still too small, please let me know. All right. Well, I think we get a really easy spot here. I think we're going to end up with a Devontae Adams, Kyron Williams double tap. This is 1 out of 6. As I was saying, 1 out of 6, a lot harder to advance the bye teams. So we're going to go ahead and queue up Devontae Adams here. I'd expect to get Kyron Williams at the top some of the time. I would also expect James Cook to come to the top. I'd expect Josh Jacobs some amount of the time as well, and basically playing it for an AFC quarterback. We do get James Cook, and that is a help me advance a little bit easier kind of thing that you'd see more often in 1 out of 6, less often in 2 out of 6. So like the smaller contests, like the mitten and the little mitten on Underdog, I haven't checked the high stakes structures yet, but I assume those are also 2 of 6, maybe even 3 of 6. But on those, you'll see more of this, like, let's try and go for the kill. Let's go all Rams all the time, baby. The reason that I think that the sidekick and the Sims still like this, where, hey, I'm going to take a bye player in a 1 of 6 advance, which is, it's a little dicey. You know, you're setting yourself up for a hard road to get out of round 1, is that phenomenon I talked about earlier where wide receiver is at a premium, right? It's not quite as bad on underdog as it is on DraftKings, but like there's still a pretty significant tier break. And so by doing Adams first, it's like, all right, if I make it to these future rounds, I'm really strong at receiver. Let me get James Cook because Kyron is good, but I don't need to pigeonhole myself into Rams Super Bowl here. I more prefer doing the, like, let me just slam Rams Super Bowl. Like, I'll go Puka plus Stafford plus, if any of them make it back to me, with Puka in a 1 of 6, where it's like, if this makes the finals, I'm just winning all the money. It's going to be so hard to get a 3-player Rams combo through. And so I think I'm more inclined to do it on that side of the board, where here I'll mix it in. The Sims will do it at the frequency that, you know, that it pops up basically is very good in the Sims. And since we're sampling from, you know, a larger set of Sims, we're taking a subset, you'll get some natural variation in your drafts. Now, Neil is going to take my Drake May here, which is going to make me very sad. Yannick might take Drake May too. That'd be a decent spot for him. Yeah. Where he starts with the Barkley, AJ Brown. I also like what Yannick did there, where he tries to push Jalen Hurts. That's how you can get some really strong stuff. Yeah, now I thought it might do this, where it's going to have me do Bo Nix. There's a couple different ways you could take this. You could do Devonta Smith and Bo Nix and just like make sure that you have really strong receiver production, because like I said, the receiver stuff is tough to come by. I think because the running back that we have is an AFC running back, and it's going to be hard for me. I can't get a Rams running back, right? So to keep Rams Super Bowl alive, which is the highest probability on the NFC side, I kind of need RJ Harvey, right? Otherwise, I'm basically foregoing Rams Super Bowl. I'm saying like, hey, Devontae Adams gets me to the finals. He might be alive for all the rounds, but the finals. But for this, we're going to take Harvey. I agree with the Sims. Shocker that the guy who helped with the Sims agrees with the Sims that are based on his inputs. But yeah, I think this is the best path, where now I basically am set up for Bills go far. But I didn't need to spend the premium capital on Josh Allen. We actually like Josh Allen a little bit more now than we did if you were drafting with a sidekick earlier. It's partially the 1 of 6 stuff. Like, hey, it's a lot easier to advance out of round 1 if you have Josh Allen. You know, like if you have the quarterback that projects for the most points, that do be helpful. But yeah, I like this setup that we have here. We'll see if my my thesis that I posited earlier about Broncos kind of going uncontested after you take a piece holds. I'm hopeful that it does. It would be very good for me. It does not. Tricky 81-81 takes Cortland Sutton. But we talked about, you know, being fairly price sensitive on Broncos pieces, especially their pass catchers. And underdog, again, I'm not so down bad for receiver as I would be on DraftKings because I have that WT position. So this Blake Corum flippening, this is a great spot to kind of explain what's going on with the Sims here. Blake Corum pops to the top because he's the most valuable player for me, because I'll get a Broncos pass catcher. I really only need one to pair with Adams. But this Corum thing really helps me in the Super Bowl because that's basically like last call for the Rams, right? I could try to push Corum. I'm probably not getting Franklin through. I honestly don't know what the fuck this guy's doing. So it's a little concerning for me. I don't care about Bucky so much. I think there's other running backs that can help me advance. I'm just worried about losing the receivers. So let's go ahead and cue Corum. Because if I lose Corum, I'm pretty sad. He is the most valuable. I think I'm going to end up doing Corum and Franklin because I don't need to do these other advanced rate guys. And wow, it's like the Sims are in my head. Because these guys, like, there's just not a huge difference between them for me. It's like Swift and Bucky can be oppo my Broncos in the Super Bowl, and that's why they're higher than Etienne and Hampton. And I mean, that's one of the many factors that makes them higher. But yeah, I do think I want to take Franklin because otherwise I risk kind of getting pretty thin at receiver at Broncos. But I'm pretty happy with this. The Jordan Whittington thing, I don't really know about this one. Yeah, I would expect him to not stay on the top as we get further. I'm pretty into the idea of like the Nico Collins. You know, I'm not as into Igbuka. We've lowered his sim inputs recently. I think that with Evans coming back and Godwin, you know, starting to get to full strength and the dip in Igbuka's efficiency, I do think it's like meaningful. You know, I still think he's a pretty good player, and a lot of it is just variance right now. It's not that Igbuka all of a sudden became bad, but I think that previously it was really easy to, you know, look at his trajectory as a young rookie and be like, oh my gosh, this guy is going to the moon. And I think we just want to take a little bit more of a measured approach on Igbuka here. Pat Bryant, I'm pretty into. There's one thing that you'll probably notice here is the Sims are basically playing this like one of either the Rams or the Broncos do not get the bye, because right now I have 5 pieces between those. And so I think the way that it's going to play it is that Broncos do not get the bye. And so we're going to take Pat Bryant here. There's just, I can get a Jacoby Myers or Brian Thomas or whatever. Did this guy end up taking a, maybe I can push Pat Bryant. Let's do the Jordan Love thing, because I do need a quarterback. And I could actually open up some Packers stuff. I saw Jaden Reed go and Watson. But I could do a Dobbs. Igbuka is here. I'm deciding if I want to IKB this. I don't think I get Igbuka back. Probably get Pat Bryant back, but he is a really important piece to me. I think I'm just going to let the room dictate what my advance rate stuff is going to be, you know, what helps me get this through. And we'll just go from there, because there's a couple things I could do. But yeah, the Jaleel McLaughlin. So if you look at the Broncos right now, for Broncos, I have 1, 2, 3, 4. So the reason a player like Jaleel McLaughlin pops up is because he is a player that would project for points in a Broncos Super Bowl. And in the outcomes where you get a Broncos Super Bowl, having 5 Broncos is an enormous EV boost, where I'm no longer constrained to the conditional probability of Broncos and Rams, right? All of a sudden I get the entire set of outcomes where Broncos Super Bowl happens. So that's why a 5th Bronco is kind of sick. This is one where I'm going to read the room and see how likely I think I am to advance. There's not a lot of dead stuff happening. Like people aren't drafting, you know, Bengals or anything really silly. I mean, there's some silly stuff. Tricky's being a little bit silly here. Like Prob's dead. Unlikely to play. If my Rams get a bye, he still has a, I mean, like he has probably the same probability that I do to advance, you know? So he's far from not a threat to me. And like, this is scary to me in the one hole. So I think this is a spot where I probably IKB the sidekick and say, hey, I need help advancing sidekick. I need to do the gross thing. I probably need to do the DK Metcalf, and I could do the Brian Thomas. Man, someone had to take Romeo Dobbs for me, huh? Yeah. And he takes Jacoby Myers. That's a good pick. All right. I'll take my medicine. Take my DK Metcalf medicine. I wonder if Jalen Warren shoots up here. You're probably, yeah. And then to hit my starting running back spot, is that easier than wide receiver? So I'm looking at, yeah, God. I mean, so I have to have Broncos not buy. So if it's Broncos not buy, I'm Harvey Cook. So yeah, it's Brian Thomas here is the better one for me. And the reason that the sidekick is not, particularly carrying there is it's probably thinking, hey dude, you're dead. What it's actually telling me here is, buddy, you're dead if the Rams get a bye too. And I'm telling it, no. I think I'm willing to do the thing where just the Broncos don't get the bye and the Rams get the bye and I make it through. It's a little thin. And so what it was trying to have me do would be like, dude, just play it like neither of these suckers get the bye. And when you hit that outcome, which by the way, not that crazy, 52% of the time or 48% of the time, the Rams are active, 62% of the time, the Broncos are active. So these are two mostly uncorrelated outcomes, right? There's probably some correlation between who they play and their schedules or whatever. Could be some small stuff there. But that's like 30% of the time that I just have like the monster nuts when I go Jaleel McLaughlin, Jordan Whittington. I bet you that when I take Jaleel McLaughlin, if I were to, Jordan Whittington goes away because he becomes much less valuable then for me, where it's like, this is just one more hurdle for Jordan Whittington to clear, to crack my starting lineup there. Anyway, reasonably happy with this one. There were definitely some things that could have gone better for us, like getting back Romeo Doubs would have been good. Also, like this guy getting multiple quarterbacks and Purdy going right before us was less than ideal. Like this, I mean, Neil is probably using the sidekick because this Purdy Jennings double tap is something that would have been pretty cool for me. Although it's not great because I don't have CMC. And so I'm not like really live for a 49ers and Broncos Super Bowl. So I do think that the best thing was this Jordan Love and then pray for Romeo Doubs to come back. I could have also IKB'd and said, I'm going to get Pat Bryant back because no one drafts Pat Bryant except the really sick people. And I'll just take Romeo Doubs here. And then that gives me an additional Super Bowl out. The other reason Jaleel is really cool here is it makes it so I have this headless or rather like naked Jordan Love Super Bowl where it's all Broncos plus Love. And you basically are adding some equity to your team when you end up with a Packers and Broncos Super Bowl. Anyway, all right. I think that is going to do it here for this solo edition of Stat Chasing, aka Sack Chasing. Thank you to everyone who tuned in. Wishing my co-host a speedy recovery. Good luck to everybody in your best ball playoffs. I will be pulling for you unless you are in the pod with me, and then I will be wishing you a very happy second place finish. And it's great news if we're in a pod where tournament structure where two people advance. But yeah, and if you do want to draft some playoff best ball with the sidekick, head over to Legendary Upside and check out the sidekick there. We've got lots of playoff best ball content coming. And yeah, that'll do it. I will see you all next week, same time, same place. Good luck, everybody.